afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to this press conference of the Institute for Economic Justice for Pay the Grants and SERI. This morning, when I was thinking about being here, I had a bit of deja vu. On the 11th of July, 2021, I was facilitating a webinar hosted by Pay the Grants. And the webinar was about extending the grant. At that time, it had been terminated. And I thought it's good to be here today to complain about these regulations, right? While the grant exists. So to kind of say the work that organizations have been doing to fight for this grant, to fight for the basic income guarantee, has been progressive, right? We're here today in a much better place than we were in July 2021. And having said that, I do want to firstly welcome everyone who is in the room, who's joined us for this press briefing. Welcome the people that have joined us on Zoom, but have a special welcome to the panel that will speak to all of you today about this case and why we've called this press briefing. On my right, I promise you he's not on my right politically, is Gilad Isaacs, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for Economic Justice, who are the litigants in this case, together with Elizabeth Raiters, also not on my right politically, who is the Deputy Chairperson of Pay the Grants. And then to my left, I'm certain that they are to my left politically as well. I have Joleen Sampson, who is one of the beneficiaries of the SRD grant, together with Vanessa, Reece. And they will speak about their experience as beneficiaries and going through the process of applying for the grant. But I'm going to start us off with Gilad, who will give some background on why we're here and why this grant is important, why this case is important.
Good morning, and thanks very much to those here and to those online. Before I offer some context and some information, I'd just like to thank those that have been involved in this case. The three organizations have been mentioned, but there's been an enormous amount of work undertaken by SERI, who have been our attorneys and have done an exemplary job of navigating through a complex set of legal issues. Our colleagues, comrades in Pay the Grants have provided invaluable input and insight into what this grant means in the real lives of South Africans. And those in the Institute have worked exceptionally hard, particularly Neil Coleman, who has led this work, and Kelly Horson, who's undertaken a huge amount of the research. So before looking at the details of this case, which I'll explain, I thought to contextualize this in three ways. The first way is to say that the story of the SRD grant is a story of government self-sabotage. This grant, as we know, was introduced in May 2020. Despite early issues, the exclusion of caregivers and of asylum seekers, this grant actually played an enormously important role. And by March 2022, 10.7 million people were applying and 10.3 were accessing that grant. Still out of a pool of about 16 million eligible, but that is an indication of a grant which scaled up faster than any other social grant which South Africa has had. And despite the issues, that's a success, right? And even at like that point, numerous problems, exclusions, and so on. So a key moment of sabotage comes in February of 2022 with the national budget. And that year, a budget was announced for a budget of 44 billion rand. And that meant that only 10.5 million people out of a pool of, again, the estimates vary, but 16 million upwards would be able to access this grant. And National Treasury essentially said, only a portion of you will be able to access this. Now, the Department of Social Development was therefore tasked with deliberately excluding eligible applicants. And I will say it again, tasked with deliberately excluding eligible applicants. And they've said this in June 2020, SASSA and DSD note that tightening the regulations and administrative processes were undertaken to ensure they remain within the allocation, right? In bold, in a PowerPoint presentation, right? It says the department only has a budget for 10.5, hence needed to add additional restrictions to remain within that budget, okay? This is government admitting what we argue in this case, that it has put restrictions to exclude people. And today, about half of those eligible are accessing. The second contextual factor, which I'd like to raise, is about the purpose, right? And whilst this grant has many potentially positive impacts on job seeking, on school retention, on subsistence activities, on spending in the economy, the key purpose is on poverty and on hunger, right? And South Africa faces a crisis of hunger, right? We know, and recent data shows that about a fifth of households are food insecure, and about a fifth send people out to beg for food every day, right? That's about 3.7 million households, right? Which is well over, in the estimates of 12, 15 million people. And this grant targets that. And it's done that insufficiently at its level, right? At 350, but it has done that relatively effectively with lifting about 2 million people above the food poverty line. The third contextual factor is to say that we sit here reluctantly, right? This is a last resort. We have made the submissions numerous times to every version of the regulations, or every relevant changing versions of the regulations. We have had countless meetings with the departments. We have produced policy briefs, fact sheets, information, and our colleagues here have undertaken enormously brave activist work on this issue. And this is where we've got to, right? That these regulations remain in place, that the exclusions continue, and that this is where we are pushed to. And we're not asking government to do something different, right? We're not saying make a different policy, right? Do this otherwise. We're saying do what you want to do and do it properly, right? Stop excluding the people who you want to be serving, right? And so that's why it's a story of self-sabotage, the overall engineer of which is those who are holding back budget allocations here. So, and I've got 4 minutes left. I'd like to just explain to the press briefly the key elements here. The legal basis pertains to both administrative justice, that laws must be enacted in a rational manner, and to the constitutional need to advance the right to social security. There are 9 issues, and I'm not going to unpack those in detail. They're in the synopsis which we've made available. The first is the overly broad definition of income. Essentially, when asked, applicants either asked or in a bank verification, all sorts of payments, right? Even things like money lent from a family or spousal financial payments and so on are counted as income, and therefore you become ineligible because you have over the amount of income. In addition, there are unlawful questions in the application which are deliberately solicited in order to exclude people. Third, it is an online only application, which of course, when targeted at the most vulnerable, is nonsensical. Fourth, it relies on a complex and an unreliable system of database verifications, both in terms of analyzing applicants' bank accounts as well as other government databases. Fifth, there is a very narrow appeals process where one cannot introduce new evidence. So if you've been excluded because you've been told you receive a UIF payment, in your appeal, you can't actually submit information showing that you don't get UIF. 6 is the arbitrary exclusion of qualifying applicants when these insufficient funds run out. So even if you apply, you're accepted. If that pool's run out, you're excluded. 7 is the real term reduction in the value of the grant and the setting of it at an insufficient level, right? Due to inflation, the value of this grant, which hasn't gone up, unlike all other social grants, has been eroded over time. And there is no system for seeing that it reaches a level which can adequately account for the needs of those receiving it. 8 is the irrational and retrogressive threshold, right? That the amount of income above which you are excluded has no rational basis and is not increasing sufficiently. And 9 is the non-payment to beneficiaries. 1.2 million people by the latest information who do manage to then jump through all of these hurdles and be approved and then aren't paid. In each of these, we ask the court for a particular relief, altering the regulations, asking that government put in a plan to address them, declaring them unlawful. It depends on the relevant issues. And that's where I'm going to leave this. Thank you for the forbearance in terms of time. So to a close, to say the story of a government self-sabotage through a restrictive budget allocation that has imposed this on DSD, a story of a South African hunger and a grant that can and should relieve that, and a story of a reluctant set of applicants here to ask government to do what it set out to do in the first place. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, you put it so clearly, right? They are planning and budgeting and then making law to fail.
Yes.
And it's really, I don't know how much more we need to say in order to convince them to do things in a much better way. But I'm going to hand over to you, Ma'am Elizabeth, to speak from Pay the Grants and provide your perspective on why you are here, why you're doing this.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and good morning to everyone that's online. The reason why Pay the Grants is part of this court case is we as activists work every day on a daily basis. We work beneficiaries on the ground, and every day we have to deal with the same issues of SASSA. We do sit with the SASSA on the board, on a forum where we meet every second month to discuss these issues, where we ask these questions. But with our last forum meeting, when we asked about the declines, I brought it up specifically, and I was told by John from Tribunal that everyone that was declined for means income source has been declined for means income source again by Tribunal, which became very worrying to me, because what is the use then? They're giving you the option to appeal, because when you are appealing, you have some type of hope that you might get approved in your appeals. So there is that little bit of hope. But as soon as he mentioned that they declined everyone, I asked him the reason why. He said no, because they already have the data that SASSA sends to them. So how can they be different from SASSA if they are using exactly the same data that SASSA is using? That doesn't make sense to me, because they should at least be able to give beneficiaries a chance to actually show that they don't have no income, that they are not UIF registered. I mean, I work with beneficiaries daily, and I have beneficiaries that are actually receiving the caregiver grant, CSG, for their kids. And they have 2 kids. So 2 kids is 1,000 rand into your bank account. Because of a lot of the issues lately with Post Bank, a lot of beneficiaries, they've moved their grants into their personal bank accounts because of the issues with the SASSA Gold Card, and are now being declined for means income source because they're receiving the CSG grant. Second of all, SASSA does not pay people for months. And as soon as you get pay dates, and you do get over 2 months in 1 month, and then you get declined. So you're getting declined because SASSA is back paying you of what they owe you. But when I raised the question to Tribunal, they said to me they do not care, in the exact words was, they do not care where the money comes from, what the money is for, and who's putting the money. As long as they see that balance in your bank account, you are being declined. And that is very, very worrying, as I'm one of those beneficiaries. It is happening to me. So I'm here as an activist, and I'm also here as one of the beneficiaries that's suffering this fate and unfair justice that SASSA is doing. Because I'm also unemployed. I'm also eligible for this grant. What I'm doing is out of passion. So why am I being declined for doing their work even? Because they don't even do their work. As I know, the whole SASSA office in my area refers the people for SRD to me, and I do their work. So why am I being declined? Because I am not employed. And it is sad when beneficiaries are crying that their kids are hungry and they have no other way. And there's just nothing I can do about it. And with Tribunal being lost and not doing what it's supposed to be doing, there's no hope for beneficiaries. So this is the reason we pay the grants. We stand behind the beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Elizabeth. I mean, it's heartbreaking, because when I was referring back to 2021, when Ramaphosa made the announcement he said, we are reinstating the grant and caregivers will not be excluded. To hear that the caregivers are being excluded purely on the income definition, it is heartbreaking because that's 2 years of you being shut out of the SRD.
Yes, even what the Gulf Tribunal even explained, even if you're getting money from Betaway, Hollywood bets, they can see that you're getting an income. That was the exact word. While he was presenting at the forum, he even used that they can see that you received the e-wallet from Betaway and the e-wallet from Hollywood bets, so you must know you will be declined. What does that have to do with the SRD grant? Because that's not the income. It's not the income. So there's a lot of issues there, and I am very, very happy to my partners, and I want to say thank you very much for being the voices of our beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Comrade Joleen, I'm gonna head over to you, but I just wanted to mention this. I think it was last year. I'll definitely get it wrong, but Status Say was commenting that the face of poverty in South Africa, it's a woman. She's probably in a rural province. She probably is in a household of 5, 6, or 7 people, And to sit here with the three of you to say, but we are the ones who are struggling with this. To sit here and say, actually, our kids are going hungry because their money must be spread across, not only to meet their needs, but now must feed us, is really heartbreaking. But I know that you will bring the energy of those women who are being excluded every day in sharing your experience.
Yes, it's very tough as a beneficiary. In 2020, as I appealed for a register for the SRD grant, I was approved. 2021, since April, I was in decline due to alternative income. And it's so tough, living in a situation that you're not used to. Because since COVID, we lost our jobs. Most of our shops closed down. So we started to depend on that 350. And it's tough, right? It's really tough knowing you used to have that soap to wash with. And now today, suddenly you don't have that soap to wash with. It's so tough as a woman, as we have children in our houses, to keep clean, to feed, all that. It's very tough for us as parents. And how to explain that to our children? It's so tough because your child sees you as a failure. You see, you used to provide. Due to COVID, we lost our jobs. We lost a lot of things. And we depended on that 350. So due to that 350 being declined, so it's very tough for us parents, our children looking at us as failures. We used to doing this, we used to doing that. Now suddenly, all of a sudden, there's nothing for the children. So I would like to ask government just to please, our declines, just approve our declines and give our back pays. Because since 2020, since April last year, I've been declined until this moment. I've been doing my appeals and all that, but it's no answers from. So thank you, now that's my story.
Thank you, Ma'am Joleen. Ma'am Vanessa.
Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Okay, that's 350s. To tell you the truth, I lost my job before COVID, and my husband lost his job during COVID. So I have no income, only just 350. And I want to tell you guys the truth, 350 is not enough. You can buy food for 2 days with it because food is expensive. People are earning a salary every month or every week complaining. Now, what about us with a 350? You must buy bread, you must buy stove, you must buy candles because we have the load shedding problem also. So that 350, I think government can do better. I think government can increase it because food is just too expensive for us. We can't afford it anymore. We don't see the 350 as it comes in. Sometimes you have to go borrow money, and most of the people are giving money with interest to you. And when that 350 comes in, you must just pay the debt. And where does the next meal come from? So it's 2 days food. What about the rest of the month? You don't want to go steal. You can't find a job. What are you supposed to do? I think government can do better and increase it for us because food is too expensive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Vanessa, and thank you, Comrade Joleen. So my panelists, they've outdone themselves in terms of time, which is great. I'm gonna give space for people who are in the room to make your comments. If you have questions that you want to ask about the case, about the grant, please feel free. There are experts sitting here. As Comrade Elizabeth was explaining earlier, even the SAR office trusts them. So you can ask your questions. And then we are also going to go into the Zoom room, and Dali will help me with filling the questions from Zoom. But now I'm opening the space, pulling the room to ask their questions, make their comments.
Good morning. It's been now 7 months now. Every month I get approval. Maybe for 2-3 days, then it goes to refer, then it says refer. And this morning when I looked again, this is 7 month, I got approval. But I got my money every time I go to my bank. Just for this past 7 months, I never got.
So you are getting approved,
And then you change it for referred.
Then it says referred.
referred.
Okay, can I answer on that? That is happening, unfortunately. They are making me happy, which I feel is not right, because I have been noticing that. I have brought it up in my past interview last week about the referred issue. I have questions, Sasa, also. Referred means fraud. So you are appearing at the board of fraud. That's where your name is listed. Either someone frauded what your identity document, or you committed fraud, but it basically means fraud. So now what happens here, you need to call the call center. When you do call the call center, they will tell you that they will send you a biometric link, where you have to take a picture of your face and send it back. But you must know, this biometric link is linked to Home Affairs. So if you have identity document, that's still the green book like us, for instance. Your face is not the same like when you were 16 years old. Your face have changed. So now you have to go all the way to Home Affairs and go and apply for a new ID so that your latest face of your age now can be on there. Yes, but this biometric link needs to book, it's linked to Home Affairs, so it needs to be the same. So what happened, they will tell you, they'll send you the biometric link and you have 72 hours to go on that link. But unfortunately, some people are still waiting since 2020 for this biometric link with referred cases, and it has not come in. So the referred cases is a very, very big issue in the SRD grant. And for some reason, SASA can't get it right to solve it. I have asked them why they do not offer the services at their local SASA offices, at post offices, so it can be easily accessible for beneficiaries just to walk in. Not everyone has a smartphone. Not everyone has data. And that link only lasts for 72 hours. So if you call in, they send you, you're lucky to get the link, and you don't have data for the next 3 days, then you still can't access the link. I mean, 350 is for people living in poverty. So where do people get smart cell phones? Where do people get data? What happens to the rural areas where people don't have internet access? So these are all the issues that I've addressed with SASA, and I still haven't gotten an answer from them.
Okay, but all the time I got my money. Right? It's only for 2023.
Yes.
Since January I never got it. So why didn't it pick up all the time?
Yes.
Refer or something.
Yes.
Why now for January, February?
It's just another way of SASA, for me personally. It's another way of SASA excluding people.
Okay, so if you can give me that number, it's fine. My sister, she's working for me. We can do it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take 2 more hands in the room, and then I'll take 3 from the virtual link. So do you have 2 hands? Virtuals. Anybody else? Okay, so Dali, after we've responded, we'll go straight to you.
So the one question I think would be interesting to hear from the panel is, looking at the back of this case is the debate around basic income. And the one thing you do hear very regularly when you're dealing with these problems, with the SRD problems, why SASSA will look at the numbers now and wonder why it has to increase when they don't realize how many people have just given up. And one thing you hear from that is very often when Pedrons will talk about the idea of basic income and why we see it as a better improvement, especially universal. And so common the responses actually come, they can't even get the SRD right. How can we trust the basic? Why are you asking for 1,500 and they cannot even do 350? So I think maybe it'll be interesting to feel like, why do you think it is important to actually still focus on this SRD? And why do you think it can go with something better?
Okay, if I have to answer that, I would say that SRD is a stepping stone towards the Universal Basic Income Grant. And that's why we are so trying to get the SRD grant right, because we want to make sure that they don't do exactly the same when the Universal Basic Income Grant come in declining deserving beneficiaries from that grant. And that's why we are asking them, because as we all know, the UBIC is on the tables everywhere. Everyone's talking about the UBIC at the moment. So you can say the SRD is the baby of the UBIC, because before you get to the UBIC, you have to fix the SRD. And that also makes me think that SASSA is sabotaging the SRD so that we don't reach the UBIC at a faster pace. That is my opinion.
So can I just come in on at least share our experience in housing? So in relation to basic services and the free electricity, the free basic water, in the past was universal, which meant that every household would automatically get the kiloliters and then get the electricity. And it worked, right? And our experience has been, once it became about targeting, then fewer households access it. So in the same way, if you had a basic income guarantee or a basic income grant that went to everyone, chances of missing people, you would completely deal with that problem. The fact that now we're sitting here saying rural women are the ones that should be targeted to get this, but they can't because they don't have data, they don't have internet access, they don't have this, won't be dealing with those problems. And I think always, unfortunately, for this country, the incompetence of government is thrown at us. But this government is incompetent, so why should we give them anything? Yes. Unfortunately, in this country, with even the vision of our constitution, we must do what needs to be done. And if that means that along the way, while we're implementing the basic income guarantee, we must make changes in terms of the process of SASSA, in terms of making sure they're able to manage and maintain the UBIC. I think we have much better chances in implementing a UBIC than we do in implementing the 350. We're not going to have the problems of my brother, because the issue of saying someone is defrauding, is using his face or his ID, won't be there because everyone will be getting the money. That's my input.
I agree completely, both with the question of a stepping stone and universality and its benefits and the distortion of targeting. What I would just add is that what's sort of tragic here is that I do actually believe, and our encounters show, that there are good, competent people within the departments who are responsible here. I'm not saying, they are, right? Whether that's everyone or whatever, but within DSD and within SASSA and DSD in particular, there are people who would agree with a pathway to a basic income. For that reason, we also think it's important to highlight the role of the National Treasury and the Minister of Finance in almost forcing the hand of the department to create these exclusionary obstacles because of a reluctance, that's a nice way of saying it, and a deliberate opposition to a basic income, right? And therefore inserting the obstacles which DSD and SASSA have then implemented and which we see before us in these court papers. And so we also, in addition to calling, the relief which we seek against DSD and SASSA, right, who are the competent legal authorities in this instance, we continue to make political calls on the National Treasury and on Presidency to work with us and with DSD in the advancement of a basic income in South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Nate. And even if you look at the capacity that DSD had to ramp up the SRD, to go from 0 to 10 million in under a year, tells us that actually we're not dealing with a sea of incompetence. Darling?
Okay, so maybe just 3 questions. Firstly, from Daniel Stein at Roundup News. And so then just, has the application been launched and have the court date been set? Is it an urgent application? And then, so those 2 are somewhat linked. And then just a follow-up is, what do you propose DSD does once the allocated money runs out? Would you like some more?
Want some more questions? Okay, who wants to take that one?
Yeah, it's been launched. It was filed last Friday. We have confirmation from the Sheriff's Office that the papers have been received. It is not being made just because of the nature of the application on an urgent basis. We are hoping for an expedited process in the course of this year. It is sad that this is not something which can be actioned, immediately. The question of the allocation is to say that is not to say that that responsibility falls on DSD. It is to say that if you are to extend on the basis of a constitutional right to the extension of Social Security, you are then making a constitutionally grounded promise to a pool of eligible beneficiaries. And one's budget must then back that up, right? So you can't put in place a policy which has a particular pool of eligible applicants and then allocate insufficient funds towards that. And so the allocation itself has to be increased to be able to accommodate all of the eligible beneficiaries.
Thanks, Gilad. Any other questions in the room? Comments are also welcome. No comments. Okay. Do you want to go again, Danny?
And then just another one from Reece, who says, what is the IEJ, and more broadly, believe the grant value should be now, given the value has been static for the last 3 years?
Sure, thank you. Do you want to take it?
Okay. With the increase of food prices, I do think that the grant should at least double in value at the moment. So I would say 693 rand or 95 rand sounds much better than 350 rand. 350 rand is nothing. A loaf of bread is 20 rand. Milk is 20 rand per liter. And that is for 1 day. Potatoes is 3 potatoes for 5 rand. So oil, that's not even, if we must just look at the basic basket just to make a pot of food that evening, it's already half of that 350 rand. And then yet you get declined if your family helps you out. So your family must leave you to starve according to SASSA. Thank you.
And just to add to that, that number which we've just heard now has a basis in an objective measure of need, an insufficient one, but that's the level of the food poverty line, right? It's not our level. It's Statistics South Africa's level, an arm of the state, broadly speaking, which measures the basic subsistence that one person needs, not a family, to ensure a daily calorie intake sufficient for that individual. So as a starting point, not as an end point, but as a starting point, we should see this level at least the food poverty line. Over and above that, we need a pathway towards both the expansion of this towards a basic income and the progressive increase of this grant to be able to meet the expanded needs which we hear about.
Thanks, Gilad.
And there's a lot of people working with Get350. Then I can tell you, I know people who get the
It's
income.
the truth. SASSA's databases, unfortunately, the databases is, I don't know if it's how they do the databases, but there is being a big cry out that people that are actually employed are receiving every month without fail the 350. I also do know people on a personal level.
Something
It's
there's
the truth.
also income or something that they get.
Sure. SERI.
How come we been declined for 3 months and then open for 1 month? And we get approved for 1 month and then after that 3 months later, you don't get it, it's declined.
Okay, we do not have an answer on that. SASSA cannot give us an answer on that. Why you are being declined for 3 months and then you get 1 month? That is the uncertain. It's so uncertain, this 350 grant, because every month when it's time that you see people are getting approved, you're already sitting in panic. Am I going to be declined? Am I going to be approved? So you're already panicking. So you can't even go somewhere and borrow money and say, I'm going to pay you back on that day because you don't know if you're going to be declined. So that is unfortunate, a very uncertain part of this. This grant is not stable like all the other grants. And this grant, for some reason, gets scrutinized for the value that it is. It gets scrutinized so badly that they look at every little detail to exclude you. I mean, if you apply for the CSG grant, you can just walk into the police station, make a affidavit, I'm not employed. And you go into your SASSA office and you apply and you get immediately approved. And the next month, they're not going to look at your bank details. The next month, they're not going to look at how many e-wallets did you receive. But for this 350 grant, they are totally excluding people and looking into everything. But I still think this has to do with Treasury, and I do think they're trying to keep the numbers down because last year's budget was 44 billion, and then the decline started with last year's budget. And then all of a sudden this year, the budget was dropped to 33 billion. So Treasury also has a lot to do with this. It go one end into the other end. So this is their whole plan. And I think that's why that also relates back to the funds issue, that they run out of funds and the people that have been receiving it maybe the past 2 months, then for that month, because they ran out of funds, now they're declining you. And that's why we're also sitting with a lot of approved and no pay dates.
So I don't get 3 for next 7 months. But I got the proof this morning and I never got the proof. So that's just basically going back to proof.
Yes, that we do know. But they only did a first batch today. So the other proofs, they are running like this month. So the other proofs should start from tomorrow.
Thank you. So Dali, I'll come back to you. You've got a question in the Zoom room.
Yes, oh, sorry. There is firstly, maybe just to note that Rachel Bukasma from Black Sash has commented to say that Black Sash stands in solid support with IEJ and PTG, and we hope this will force the government to do the right thing for the poor.
Yes.
And then we have a question from Neo Mulungane, who says, what would a suitable means test be when trying to check deserving recipients?
Go ahead, Gilad, and maybe just on the solidarity point, I think this journey has been walked with many organizations, and Black Sash has been one of the ones that have been championing the need of the basic income guarantee. They've been part of the boardroom fights to make this the SRD possible. So just to thank Rachel for registering that, and we know that we have a strong partner in them. So I'll head over to you, Gilad.
This is certainly, there might be a number of applicants on this case, but this is certainly a fight which, and a policy process which involves a range of civil society, sometimes union and other actors. And I'll just echo that Black Sash is like one amongst others who have championed this. On Neo's comment about a suitable means test, it's a complicated question. The idea of universality to which we are sort of pushing in a basic income could see a means test eliminated. So for instance, it could see a means test eliminated and those over a certain income taxed in a way which would then receive back that grant. It could see a much higher means test, similar to that of the child support grant, which is a multiple of the grant value and around 5,000. It could see a means test at least the upper bound poverty line, or a measure of what it actually takes to provide subsistence needs to a household opposed to a individual, which would take you to around 6,000 Rand. So, I don't think we as an institution or as a coalition have agreed on a sort of magic number yet. What we need is a process to object to sort of sensibly measure need, right? And even if someone's working and they're getting 100 Rand from a piecemeal job, that shouldn't exclude them either, right? We don't want to make a situation where we pit the underemployed and the exploited against the unemployed, right? So there's a range of factors here, but we should certainly be seeing a means test at least around the value of the child support grant. So we're talking about a means test of 4,000 upwards.
Thanks. Do you want to add anything? Okay, thank you. Thank you. We've got another question.
Yes, and we're going to try and see whether Russ Rensburg can pose his question. Russ, if you please pose your question.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, look, we are in full support of the IEJ and pay the grant.
I'm not sure why we're not hearing you.
Can go again.
Try again quickly. Can you hear me? No.
We can hear you, but if you can just speak up.
Okay, sorry. Firstly, as the Rural Health Advocacy Project, we stand in solidarity with you, and we are fully behind you in this court case. And as part of our support, maybe I think there are just two questions that maybe are covered in the court papers. So the first thing is, how do we counter or have we already sufficiently dealt with the fact that the SRD was sort of linked to COVID-related distress? You know, have we counted that, and how can other civil societies understand and communicate that in our support of this? And then the second thing, how are we going to avoid the state, like it has, you know, limiting increases of other disability grants and pension grants by saying that they're now paying the SRD? And so it's almost cannibalizing the social assistance that the state is currently giving. How do we counter that in our messaging in support of this case? Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Comrade Russell. I think we've captured the question. And just to start you off, I think the one thing that I think even in this coalition we accept is that the food insecurity didn't start with COVID. COVID worsened it. And I think even now without COVID, the fact that we haven't had full economic recovery means we have probably a decade at least to recover back the points pre-COVID. And that's an important point to make. But earlier this year, I think when it was during the budget, Gilad and I were in an interview together, and we're talking about the Minister of Finance making the very same point that if you want a basic income guarantee, forget health, forget education, and forget. So in a case like this, of course, we can't fight those political battles. This coalition is a coalition of the think tanks, of the legal firms, of the movements, precisely because some of these fights are going to have to be fought on the battlefield, on the ground, to say actually in this country you have to provide all of those goods together. That there isn't a way where you say we're going to cut the education budget because we're enabling your children to eat, or we're going to cut the health budget because you have a roof over your head. All of those things must happen together. And I think the reason that is because we have a constitutional vision that says we are going to improve the quality of life of people living in South Africa on every day. And that is a demand that all of us need to be making to counter the narrative that you are right. Treasury is going to throw at us probably next year, or even in a few months, or even at when they file papers in this case, they will say, we can't afford to do this because of this and that. But the commitment has to be that the poor are well taken care of. That's what the Constitution demands.
Yes.
And we need to, I mean, I agree with that entirely. And what we need to be able to see is that government, in the language of international law to which we are a signatory, is mobilizing the maximum available resources towards this end. And we do not but believe that they are, right? That there are available resources in society which can be put towards the social wage. There is no wealth tax in a society in which white rich people accumulated wealth under apartheid. And so, sure, there are that envelope is in the end going to be finite. But the question is whether the size of that envelope is what it is, and how we as movements across sectors can collectively articulate a integrated set of measures which we think can tackle the societal needs. Just to say on a technical point, the grant legal basis does account for its move from a COVID grant, in the sense that it was originally promulgated under the Disaster Management Act in April 2022. It then moved to the Social Assistance Act, and the regulations which we are currently reviewing or pointing challenging. Thank you. This is why we have lawyers and economists working together. Are those which have their roots in that April 2022 set of regulations under the Social Security Act. And it's under that basis that we could see the expansion of this. So there should be no, and we might hear this, oh, this was temporary, right? This was a grant that was for emergency. And this is sort of underlying logic that this is only in 1 year's budget, right? In the medium-term expenditure framework, there's no money put out for 2023, 2024, 2024 to 2025. But you can no longer position this as a emergency COVID grant. This is a grant like any others, part of our social assistance framework. And it's a grant that in some form, as we move towards a basic income, is here to stay. And therefore needs to be fixed and needs to be optimized.
Thank you, Gilad. So we still have a few minutes, just checking with my people in the room.
Let me apologize for coming late. I mean, I'm from CWA. We in solidarity with the comrades, and this has shown or has expressed that, how can I put it? It has exposed the country's administration from Department of Labor to Department of Home Affairs, because even ourselves we've been in the campaign. When it started, when we found people have been declined because the system says they are working, but they are receiving UIF money, but you find that the person has never worked before. So this is a good initiative which we fully support, and we also like as soon as we get the date for the court hearing, let us know as organization so that we can mobilize on the day of the hearing. Possibly you can be outside the area where we'll be putting pressure to whoever will be presiding over this matter, so that at the end we achieve not only the 350 but the universal basic income.
So I couldn't clap because I'm representing the litigants. I'm like, we're not trying to put any pressure. But just to say to our comms team who are here, they're going to make sure that all of the partners are kept updated to make sure that we are all together. I think
Yvonne has something.
or Yvonne want to say something. Yes, I think Gilad earlier mentioned the term self-sabotage.
Yes.
So basically, the government is doing everything in its power to say to us, this grant is not possible. We have it now because you called us into order, but it's not possible. And we're going to keep holding the line to make sure that it's possible. Go ahead, Yvonne.
And so it's just a comment from my side. I hear all of so that there's legal basis for the case, and it's incredibly complex. And there's going to be all of these economic arguments who can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be questions around the Constitution. And I guess we're also in a space where some areas or values in the Constitution are also being questioned. But for me, it also I always come back to the moral argument. For me, that is the underlying this. Like, how can we? What is the moral justification for us living in a society where there is such inequality that some people are not able to survive?
Mm-hmm.
How is that immoral, apart from the economic, the budgetary, etc.? How is that as an individual, as a society? How are we not protesting? Like, how are we accepting of that? And how is that morally something we can think we can live with? And just that argument for me convinces me personally. I mean, we as a society, in government, we have to do better. We are compelled to do better. I cannot live in a society where my neighbor does not have food. how is that even something that is tolerable? So for me, it's just bringing us back to all of these complex legal arguments and the economic arguments that will be thrown, but at the heart of it is who we are as a society and how we take care of one another.
Yeah, thank you so much. Joleen. Thank you for making that point. And so what I'm going to do, Dali, are you okay? Because I've run out of time. So I'm gonna start with Mom Vanessa. Just to respond to you one if you want, but just give us your closing comment. Or if there's something else that you want to respond to earlier.
Actually, I want to say, since this 350 grant started, my husband was already down. He already lost his job. Since then, he was declined until now. Since the 350 started, they keep on declining because they say if income source of UI, but there's nothing there. And I'm a diabetic, so I have to eat 3 meals a day, solid meals. And with this 350, I can't afford it. The other day, Saturday, I did make 50. So at my age, I can't find a job also. So the only income is 350.
Yeah, no, it's really heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking.
For me, today sitting here, since I hear all the comments and all the things, so I'm standing firm on fighting this battle. There's no backing down now. We have to take government on because this is very unfair towards all of us. We all feel the pain, the suffering together in a community and as people around us, you know. So we're all suffering the same way. So as I ask from our colored community, please stand together because some of us don't want to stand together. So thus we have to stand together. That's all I ask from our community, the colored community.
I want to jump off that point made on the moral basis and emphasize once again that we're going to hear a lot of arguments that we actually need to solve employment, which is true, and we actually need to do these other things, and this grant isn't solving those things. But it's very important for us to bear in mind the purpose of this grant.
Yes.
All right, and this grant does help people seek jobs, and it does help stay inside school, and it does help local economies. But first and foremost, it is about providing people with a basis upon which to live, right? Because we want to live in a society in which people don't starve, right? And so we mustn't let people distract us and tell us that the grant isn't working because it doesn't create employment, or the grant isn't working and we must have something else, have other programs which do other things, right? Yes, we must have other programs that do other things, but this grant must function properly as a means to provide a basic level of life to people, because we want to live in a society in which our neighbors don't starve.
On my closing comment, I would just like to say, pay the grants will fight this fight till the end. We will make sure that government answers to every question that we've asked. And we will make sure that especially the people we say from between 40 years up until 60, that really needs this grant, receive this grant, because as we know, all jobs being advertised is up until the age of 35 years old, targeted for youth. So what happened to us? So our age doesn't make, we don't get jobs because of our age. So how are we supposed to survive? And I just want to tell the government, it is my constitutional rights and beneficiaries' constitutional rights to social assistance. We are not supposed to be starving. Thank you.
So thank you to everyone. I did realize I didn't even introduce myself, but I am Nomzamo Zondo. I'm a lawyer. I work for SERI, who's litigating this case. I'm the Executive Director, but thank you so much for an engaging conversation. Thank you to my panelists for your inputs. I think
Thank
this is
you.
the end.
Thank you.
Want to say cut?
Thank you. For the really great. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's for that.
I think so too.
I think it's nothing is black and white and so much. Thank you.